הילדה אור על אפיקי מים כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקי כהילדה אור על אפיקי מים כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקי צמא נפשי לאלוקים צמא נפשי לאלוקים ללך מתי יבוא וראה פני האלוקים הילדה אור על אפיקי מים כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקים כהילדה אור על אפיקי מים כנפשי תאור אליך אלוקים צמא נפשי לאלוקים צמא נפשי לאלוקים ללך מתי יבוא וראה פני האלוקים נפשי תאור אליך אלוקים צמא נפשי לאלוקים צמא נפשי לאלוקים ללך מתי יבוא וראה פני האלוקים
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי? עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, שא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מרים השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישכן שומר ישראל.
All right, let's try this again. We're definitely having some internet connectivity problems here, so I apologize for that. John, can you hear me? See if we can bring John on stage. John? Oh boy. I'm just gonna, sorry about this. Alrighty. John, can you hear me? John?
Hi.
Can you hear me? Let's see if this is going to work. Okay. Can you hear me okay now? I'm going to call you on the phone. I promise we will get this worked out, guys. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Hey, I can see you and everything. Everything okay?
Okay, I hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yep, but not from the earphones. Not from the
earphones.
Not from the meeting.
You just hear me through the phone.
Yep.
So you know what? I'm gonna kick you from the studio and come back in. All right?
No problem.
Okay. All right. So let's just wait for John to come back in. I'm sorry, but we're having some internet connectivity problems here today. That is part of the good and the bad price of living in the Golan Heights. They still have not gotten fiber optic networks throughout the entire Golan Heights, but we'll get it solved. I switched over to a different network, and I hope that's going to kind of solve the problem. While we're waiting for John to come back in, I'll just run a quick speed test. Not the best, but it should be enough to run the podcast. Let's see if John can come back in. And let's see him. Okay, John, can you hear me now? You can't hear me. So I think it's something on your side. I think you need to set your, I think you need to set the speaker to your headphones, and then we should be okay.
Second.
No problem. Take your time. You can always edit this out later. Or not. People like to watch dead air.
One second, okay?
No problem. It's not a problem.
Oh, okay. Now I can hear you, which is so strange.
Okay.
Okay, good. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly. You hear me okay?
Okay. Yeah, great. Sorry for that. I did a little test beforehand and everything was fine, but who knows what happened.
That's the way it goes.
Okay.
That's technology.
Okay.
You know, my side profession is technology, and I sometimes you just go over to a computer and you smack it a couple of times and it starts working.
And it worked.
That's
kind of what happened now. It could be old school.
That's called high tech. That's called high tech.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me do the introduction very quickly. So we're here with Jon Nelson. Jon Nelson is a 25-plus year resident of Jerusalem who wishes to be identified only as a Torah and Tanach-leaning Jew, and he'll fill us in on the rest. He does not want to be labeled, and I totally understand and respect that. I don't like being labeled either. He's currently in the process of getting his master's degree in early Christianity at Aberdeen University, which is based in Scotland. And he also wants us to know that he's a musician, that I actually already knew, and a diehard Grateful Dead fan. So you would have enjoyed our little Yom HaAtzmaut gathering yesterday. It was a whole bunch of hippies. I was the only one not partaking in certain substances which are ingested through the lungs. But everyone else was, and I think they would have looked at me a little bit strange, except they were too stoned to even realize that I wasn't getting stoned with them. Anyway, neither here nor there. So we are going to be talking today. I'm going to essentially let you kind of lead the discussion because this is your area of expertise. And if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that what you want to do is establish essentially two facts, or we won't call them facts, 2 points of view, 2 opinions. Number one, that the Tanakh clearly speaks about an upcoming Messiah for the end of days, which I agree with, but I would probably downplay it. I don't think it's the focus of the end of days. And number two, I think you want to to attempt to prove to us that that Messiah that's being spoken about is none other than Jesus of Nazareth / Yoshua. I don't know what you call him. So I should preface by saying, and I'm on record with this for many, many decades. It should be of no surprise to anybody who knows me that I am not a believer in Jesus of Nazareth. I don't believe that he was or is or will be Messiah over Israel. I don't even allow, in my own theology, I don't even allow for the possibility, because I don't believe that the future Messiah over Israel will be a reincarnation. I believe it'll be a new person. So that also knocks out, along with Jesus of Nazareth, also knocks out other people such as Bar Kokhba Shabtai Tzvi and Menachem Mendel Schneerson, among others. And yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. So, John, do you want to give us a little bit of insight? I'm going to kind of let you lead the direction. This is not in any way, shape, or form meant to be an antagonistic kind of broadcast, as I mentioned. So I'm going to let you kind of present your case, but I certainly will raise objections where I see them, if I see them. There may be some things that I am in agreement with. I will say that one thing I'm in agreement with, although I just see Jesus of Nazareth as a purely historical figure, just like Alexander the Great, or I don't know, who's another person, Abraham Lincoln. He clearly, in retrospect, ended up being a very important historical figure. And there's many things that I agree with him about. I had a teacher many years ago who called him a Kara'ite-leaning Jew. I think that's an accurate statement. He certainly does not embrace the same minutia, the same legalisms of the Pharisees / rabbis. Actually, I guess, the end of the Pharisees being the rabbinical period. And I agree with some of what he says, maybe even much of what he says. The example I always give is, of course, in Matthew 23, the tirade against the Pharisees. Couldn't agree more. I quote it all the time to various rabbis. And I'll just tell you one quick story, and then I'm going to let you get going. So many years I learned with a certain rabbi who shall remain unnamed. And he always used to say, or he would say to me, that, well, your criticisms of this hyper legalism of the rabbis, that's the rabbis of this time. That's the rabbis of here and now. If you go back to the real rabbis, the rabbis of the period of the Rishonim, the rabbis of the Tanaim and the Amoraim, the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, you'll see they weren't like this. They weren't so legalistic. And I basically read to him Matthew chapter 23. So again, not that I believe that Jesus is Messiah or anything, but as an historical figure, we see that he points out that the Pharisees haven't changed. In 2,000 years, they're the same old Pharisees that we knew and loved back then, just as legalistic. And, in Kol Chadash Tachat HaShamash, to quote Ecclesiastes. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, John, and why don't you give us a little bit of introduction as to where you are, what your theology is, however you want to take it.
Okay. Just a disclaimer, I don't have a presentation worked out in advance, so I'm happy to lead to the extent that it comes out that way, but I really prefer, or I appreciate the sort of organic way we've been talking. So feel free to let's do it in smaller chunks. Maybe just by way of introduction, I would just maybe clarify what I mean and what I think the Tanakh means, or what we could say in English is, resurrection. Of course, we see that in Daniel. It gets referred to as Tehiyat HaMetim, in later Hebrew as a theme, but you use the word reincarnation. So just by way of introduction, let's clarify. I'm
sorry, if I said reincarnation, I meant resurrection.
Resurrection? Fair enough. Fair enough.
My
and that's
mistake.
important.
I do not believe at all in reincarnation, and I'm assuming you don't either. Right.
I definitely don't.
Okay.
So I think another maybe perhaps interesting point of departure would be like the centrality of this phenomena of the Messiah in the Tanakh. We can both agree, we both have the same text in front of us in terms of the amount of words and thematic devotion to the theme of the end of days just at all. And definitely the end of days being characterized as something, along the lines of a resurrection, anything along supernatural lines, even is very scant. We can both agree that it's the end of days and the redemption are mostly described in worldly terms of a physical return of the people of Israel to the land, and keeping of the Torah Moshe, and yes, that has world, universal consequences in terms of nations of the world coming to the knowledge and the true worship of the true God, the God of Israel. We both can agree that that's sort of the way it's mostly described. What we have is clearly, though, from the Second Temple period, more literature and what looks like internal Jewish meditation and concern with the other aspects that those people saw being part and parcel of that redemption, which is more in cosmological terms, more cosmic terms, more, for lack of a better word, spiritual terms. And what I mean by that is the judgment, like and then once we kind of calibrate the discussion, I think along those lines, we can perhaps see that maybe the Tanakh is talking more about this coming at the end of days and the redemption on multiple levels at the same time. So I would make a case for that before even trying to because I can't convince or prove it to anybody that Jesus is the Messiah if they already reject such the concept of first of all resurrection. I'm not saying you do, but I'm just saying we have to have certain foundational.
I do. Based on, as you mentioned, it's explicit in Daniel chapter 12, verse 2. So
yeah. So what's interesting is that the way we can start in a few different ways, but that was just sort of like an introduction. I really do think it's important to clarify our terms and to be open to reading the Tanakh in a way that is deeper and more, I think, truer, more authentic to what it's painting. I mean, Tanakh is a book, in a certain limited sense, it's some words written on a page or some scrolls. But we have prophets there, and we have in the Torah Moshe, we have prophecies about the end of days, and they're scant, and they're figurative, and they're poetic sometimes. They're not clear what's going on. But we also have other themes throughout the Tanakh, throughout Tehillim, the Psalms, where we have this trajectory of God setting the world right, and also bringing justice for all the injustice that has been perpetrated, and actually bringing people into, on an individual level, also their just reward, or God forbid, their punishment. So this is like a theme that clearly becomes way more pronounced in the New Testament. So when we just even approach what Jesus of Nazareth taught, and the way the events surrounding him should, I think, probably be understood. They should be understood in that eschatological sense of bringing some of those themes I just mentioned in the Tanakh more to the forefront. So that's just like a little one way I would try to calibrate the conversation from the beginning. But just to bring things back down, my view simply is that when I read the testimonies, the accounts that we read in the Gospels, I find them historically impressive, historically credible. I didn't say inerrant. They don't have to be inerrant. I'm not even sure we can prove what's in the Tanakh is inerrant, but I would just say I found them historically credible enough to believe the accounts of what his predominant teachings were on all the levels, some of which you mentioned earlier, criticism of legalism, but also in terms of what he was predicting to be a reckoning that was coming, and also the pronouncement of the temple that he declared that would be destroyed shortly, and it was actually. Some of that, but also the the signs that he demonstrated, I find those accounts to be historically credible. And because that, I would just say, like, there's this guy. I believe the conversations there. I think they sound a lot like you said. Things haven't changed much. Like it sounds like conversations with the religious establishment that we could be hearing now, where like, what's the Torah really about? You know, you guys are saying it's about this minutia, and we could try to loosely refer to it as legalism. There's other things in there. I think it's more nuanced than that. But a lot of it has to do with the other, if you will, the emphasis, the de-emphasis of legalism. The antidote to legalism, or the opposite side, is a huge emphasis on repentance, which is something that doesn't have legal criteria and bounds to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's something.
If I can break in there for a second and just
yeah.
raise a couple of points. So again, while I mentioned that, I believe that, or I agree with some, perhaps even many, of the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. Well, you're pointing out, I don't know if you'd call them proofs, but maybe indications that he was the Messiah. And number one indication, or number one proof, we'll call it that, for lack of a better word, that you're pointing out is that some of the events that he did, some of the things that he did, such as like the healing of the paralyzed man, the healing of the blind man, et cetera, just ring true, right?
Well, I didn't say that proves he's a Messiah. I was just describing what I see there as historically credible, that there was a person who spoke what seems to me very relevant words of truth and an admonition towards what we would maybe both agree as religious corruption, but also demonstrating that God was with him in the way that we see in the Tanakh, and that was where I was heading. But I didn't get to being Messiah or not. You could be a prophet, but not be the Messiah. I didn't get there.
Got it. My pushback on that would be that there are many people who make predictions, who are called prophets, quote unquote, who are not actually literal prophets. I don't know who would come to mind. Maybe Donald Trump made a lot of predictions. If you listen to some of his interviews already back in the 1980s and 1990s, a lot of what he said has come true. Rabbi Kahana, among right-wingers here in Israel. Oops, I don't know what happened to John. Let's wait a second. Perhaps come back in. Let's give him a second. John, you're back?
I'm sorry, terribly sorry.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's not a big deal.
Okay.
It's not a big deal. Right. So again, I was using the example of Rav Kahana, many other people. Even I made predictions 20, 30 years ago, which
for sure.
War broke out with him. You get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So there's a big difference between someone who is able to see, Hakham, to quote the rabbis, which I don't often like to do, but
I don't think
we call them I'll quote the rabbis again for the second verse and the first verse, right? So but that's not proof that someone is an actual prophet of Yahweh, right?
Yes and no. I would just say that, first of all, I don't predicate my my belief that he was a prophet on his many predictions that came true, because he didn't seem to make that many that have come true yet. The only one that comes to mind is that. Okay, but I was talking about the other signs and wonders, because the Torah says, we could go to it if we want, in Dvarim, that when a prophet comes, if he does, are you with me? I lost you there for a second, Melech. I'll just wait for you because it's your show.
Okay.
Okay, good. It's good.
Am I back?
Sounds like yeah.
Unfortunately, this is one of the prices of living in the Golan Heights. There are many wonderful things about living in the Golan Heights, but high-speed internet is not one of them.
It's not one of the.
It's very. No. It's a crapshoot. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it's interesting that the Torah says two ways that you recognize a Navi. Is that it says the ot v'hamofet asher diber lecha, right? If it's like that you identify him by the sign and mofet, and we know like mofet seems to be the way we refer to sort of supernatural miracle.
And why don't you give us chapter and verse on that one in case anyone?
Okay, no problem. So Deuteronomy 13.
Mm-hmm.
And it says verse 2.
Mm-hmm. So Deuteronomy 13:2.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can post it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I of course, like I think it's assumed that there will be prophets. We were already told in Numbers, right? We were told Numbers about prophets rising up in the camp, right? And they were jealous on Moses' behalf that Madad, what's his name? Eldad and Medad were still prophesying. And Moshe was like, I wish, would it be that the whole people of God were prophets, right? And then famously the next Miriam and Aaron speak ill against Moses, and that's where God distinguishes Moses from other prophets. At that time, I'd argue that it was not a future statement, but up until then, at least, he was qualitatively different and should be revered or respected.
Sure.
Okay, so point is that we know about prophets already. So when we get to Devarim, Deuteronomy 13, it's saying like, make sure when a prophet comes and whom you recognize as a prophet through his signs and wonders or through his.
Sure.
Okay, that just make sure that you don't go after someone who does miracles that tells you to worship another god. So I just see that.
In other words, someone who's, in other words, what Deuteronomy, actually, I'll try to post the verse here. Just give me 1 second. Let's see if this is going to work, just so the listeners can get an idea of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's see. So it's Deuteronomy 13:12. Oops, cutting off our faces, but that's okay.
That looks great.
Right. So what you're saying, John, is that someone who's proven themselves to already be a prophet, if they then try to tell you to go worship other gods, then it goes on to say that prophet should be put to death. In other words, he's apostated himself. Okay.
Absolutely. And then also it says later on in Deuteronomy 18, Moses repeats, he actually repeats as a prediction in the context of the revelation at Sinai, where people were afraid to hear God's voice directly. So he mentions that as a segue back into why there will be prophets. It's because people themselves can't handle that direct revelation. So he says that Deuteronomy 18 verse 17, Yehovah says, I say on your show I can actually say the name.
Yeah, absolutely you can.
Baruch Hashem.
I say it all the time on my studies.
Yeah. We can have a whole conversation about that also. They have said well in which they have spoken. I will raise them up a prophet from among their brothers like you, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall happen that whoever will not listen to my words, which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. And then it goes on to talk about the prophet who is a false prophet. So now here it's less about like a prophet comes and tells you to do something that you shouldn't. It's also like, what if someone is a false prophet? But once again, we get this recognition that Yahweh will actually send prophets like Moshe that will speak his words. And I think we just get from the other example that you recognize someone partially. One of the ways you recognize them is because they do a sign. I think I don't think it's a terrible. I think there's a lot to be learned from the fact that all these prophets in the Tanakh do miracles. I mean, not all of them, a lot of them do. So Elijah, Elisha. I was just reading yesterday how the woman, I mean, you could say what you want, but the woman from Zarephath, how do you say it in English? Zarephath. So she, you know, he with whom he dwelled, and she had a son, and he died. And then when he died,
and he brought him back to life.
And she said, "Now I know you're a Ish Elohim." You know,
right?
Now I know you're a man of God. So just saying on a simple level, like when you see Jesus of Nazareth coming, and he's saying words that are true, like Torah-based criticism in the spirit of the other prophets. I'm not saying he's the first one to rail against religious corruption. Sure. So he's like speaking what identifiably are words of God or in line with the word of God. And then he also demonstrates through science, through wonders, moftim, nisim, by healing and raising people from the dead and exorcising demons, all sorts of stuff. I think when I read that I find literally it historically credible for various reasons. We can get into that, but I just say, like, well, that's a prophet. God's in the house, so I think that I'm being commanded to listen to them, as long as they're not telling me to go after other gods, which he's not, clearly. Sure. Then I think he's a prophet. Now, the fact that he's rejected and killed and all that stuff almost sweetens the deal, because we have a huge precedent in Tanakh for someone who's actually the minority prophetic, lone prophet against the establishment being rejected. So, I hate to say it, but it's like almost makes it more credible that he...
Jeremiah and Micaiah were during the time of Yehoshaphat. Elijah was hunted down by Ahab, and so on and so forth. So
it almost makes it even more credible that, like, because I always, like, it's so funny if we were just to jump, I mean, humorously, you and I could probably disagree about Jesus, but like agree about so much other stuff, that if a true prophet came right now, the last thing he's going to say is like, let alone, especially the Messiah, great job, Orthodox Jews, you've been keep it up, you've just done it so well, here's the stamp. I appreciate you arguing about...
I'm not exactly expecting that.
Yeah, you guys are just...
Sorry. John, if I could just respond to one or two things here. I think, again, we're having some... Can you hear me on that side? You hear me? Okay.
Perfectly.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, even if the video gets a little bit stuck on your side, I've heard you without any interruption very well.
Okay, good. Let me just see what's going on here, because I am getting some weird kind of... I may go out and come back in, as a matter of fact. Oh, boy. I don't know what's going on. Something's acting very strange. Maybe the computer is overheating a little bit. It shouldn't be. It's an Apple. You can hear me okay, though?
Perfect.
You can. Okay. Just give me 1 second here.
And I suspect if I hear you perfectly, then the recording also, the other...
I hope so, but I'm not 100% sure about that. You know what? Give me 1 second. I'm just going to turn the camera off, and I just want to try to set here. Actually might... let me just see what's going on here. Yeah. 1 second here. And now I'm kind of like half stuck. I'm getting this beach ball thing. All right. We'll try for the best, but just let me try one thing here. Let's see what the internet speed is. Not great, but I think it's going to be good.
Beach balls often RAM if you have like anything open in the background that you don't need.
I know, I've closed everything in the background, and I don't know why. I have a feeling, let me just turn on the AC here, because maybe it's a little bit hot in here, and maybe that's affecting the performance of the computer. Just give me 1 second. All right, we'll see that helps the situation a bit. I don't know. All right, and we'll hope for the best. So just to give a little bit of response here. So your argument, if you want to call it that, it's predicated on two elements, okay? Number one, that Jesus of Nazareth was actually a prophet, and you used for your proofs that he predicted things. He did signs and wonders, okay?
Yeah, mostly the latter. I admitted doesn't come to mind more than like one prediction. It's pretty significant, okay. but yeah, mostly the latter.
Okay,
so doing one.
According to these signs and wonders, then there would have to be some kind of proof that he actually did these signs and wonders. So essentially the proof that you've presented so far, and we're still early in the discussion, but as far as I understand it, the proof that you've presented so far is essentially that it just rings true. Okay, and obviously,
well, no, the proof. If you were then, you would have been able to see there was this famous person sitting at the gate that everybody knew, a paraplegic from his life, from his birth, or someone blind from their birth.
So why don't you put that in the category of Rebbe stories? I mean, we have stories about.
Oh no! So you're asking why do I believe this miracle story opposed to?
Well, let me just present the case a little bit, okay? So we know that there are plenty of Rebbe stories throughout the generations, right? So the Maharal of Prague famously brought the golem back to life, and I don't know how many religious Jews, I don't know what percentage of religious Jews actually believe that, but there is certainly a significant percentage of religious Jews who actually believe that story. If you look at some of the Rebbe stories of any of the Hasidic masters, including straight up to Menachem Mendel Schneerson, if you read some of his Hasidim have written entire books about the miracles, the wonders and miracles that he performed, and none of them are objectively true, right? They're kind of Rebbe stories, and we know this is a common phenomenon that people will develop what you can call fan fiction, Rebbe stories, however, whatever you want to call it, around certain figures. So for me, when I read these things, they don't ring true, right? I'm not saying that to insult, but I just read them, and over the many decades, I've had many people try to convince me of this idea that Jesus of Nazareth is someone special, and I concede that he's an important historical figure, but retroactively, but not more than that. For whatever reason, Yahweh certainly did want to turn him into a significant historical figure, but the same could be said again for Alexander the Great and Abraham Lincoln and whoever else, right? But so your argument so far is it rings true, or perhaps that many people saw it, but we could say the same thing about many of these Rebbe stories, right? You pick up any.
So great. So your question is essentially why believe this account as credible? Right. Yeah. Right. So I don't know if you can prove something is credible, like similar like to witnesses. I think it's something that a person has to objectively consider. Do I, you know, I the same thing about conspiracy theories. I've had conversations with people who are like close to me, where I try to argue with them about, you know, whether the Earth is, you know, flat earthers. I hate to say it, you know. I don't know.
Yes, I know a couple of them right here in Katsuin where I live. I don't have time for them anymore. I tell them to go watch YouTube videos and leave it at that.
Exactly. So what's hard to do is convince them or someone like that why I believe the Earth isn't flat. First and foremost, it's not just because not because of geological and cosmic calculations I've made, because I'm not, which I think they've already made, but mostly because I don't think these guys who have literally traveled up out of the atmosphere many times for the last 5 decades, I don't think they're lying, and I don't think the people working for them are lying. I just don't think they're lying.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Buzz Aldrin actually punched out a flat earther.
He punched him right. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, he punched him.
When it gets to the moon, it's more complicated. I also believe in the moon for the same reason, but I could, if someone just believed that was the hoax, but everything else they believed, I would have more, it's different.
You remember, I'm sorry to get off topic, but
no, I do believe.
Do you remember Ali G, Sacha Baron Cohen?
Yeah.
So he's interviewing Buzz Aldrin, right? And he says to him, we've all heard the conspiracy theories, so please settle it for us once and for all. Does the moon exist?
He's such a troll.
He's funny. He had a real mean streak, so I kind of dropped away from him after a while. But he there's no doubt about it.
He's a leftist. He's probably like a leftist, but yeah. Okay, but
sure
So
anyway,
in a similar way, sometimes it comes down to like credibility. So I don't know.
Pretend I'm a tabula rasa, and I know nothing about nothing, and you're trying to convince me that Jesus of Nazareth is a prophet, or that these.
I would say read Mark. I would say
okay, so
because
let's take a verse.
And I would say, but let's make the point for a second. I would say read it in its breath, and read John in its breath. And I would say this. I would say this to my to someone who I cared about, who I have, if you're asking, you're a blank slate, like you said, or I would say,
for someone who's searching.
I would say Jesus, this character here, is he's going up against religious corruption and legalism, people have distorted the word of God in the Torah. And he's trying to bring people back. He's already speaking words, truthful words. I said it's already. So first of all, that's not. I don't know if anybody had the power to create a golem. Why didn't they set people right about their insane halachic weird ideas? That's strange to me. I think if a Messiah is coming, he should rail against the religious establishment first and foremost, because I think it's one of the greatest obstacles to seeing the truth of God. Whatever God wants to reveal is this idea that religious precedent is authoritative, like rabbinical, Sanhedrin style, whatever you want to call it. This kind of infallibility of our elite scholarly scribal class I think that's a block to God. And I agree
with you, obviously.
So I'm telling. So when Jesus is coming and doing that, then 500. It took 500 years to happen. Even to the last prophet. I don't know, last one, Daniel or whatever. But a lot happened in those years, and I have sympathy. I'm not anti rabbis as people. I think there's I can understand how they got to where they got to, but by the time you get to, it's the ways of the fathers. And this is why aren't you washing your hands before bread? Like as soon as you open your mouth and say that, you are acting as if, and it got even worse, that we put a blessing on it, that God commanded you. If God commands everything in Judaism, then God commands nothing, and we've seen where that has come 2,000 years later. So he, in my mind, did exactly what I would expect a prophet to do right then, and that's the first reason why I'm starting to believe him. And so I'm saying. That's why I think he's categorically. Those accounts are different than the other ones, because he's actually criticizing from the inside. He's not someone from the outside criticizing. From the inside, trying to bring people back to the Torah as Jews. So that's why I also want to say that distinguishes him from other Rebbe fan fiction, because they're all doing miracles, but they're just saying now also be super strict about all sorts of weird Kabbalistic halakha. Like why? Like why did they? That's already really sus, as I would say.
Okay,
so
but
that's my
you could
first.
say then the same about the Karaites later on, right? They railed against the rabbis from within. They certainly rejected Pharisaic Judaism. They made predictions,
Good.
There's no documentation that I can think of any of the medieval Karaite sages performing any miracles, but Jesus was certainly not the only one who railed against the Pharisees. Maybe he's the most famous one, but he's certainly not the only one. So maybe you could say that that's a prerequisite, but there's more to the story, right? And
absolutely, because then I would say if he was just giving relevant criticism or something that resonates as a restorative, prophetic type, or like biblical reprimand, tochacha, then that would be good. That'd be great. Like, and I think to a certain degree, you're like, yeah, I'm willing to. I hear that from him, and I appreciate that he said that. Okay, good.
Sure,
so,
absolutely.
but yeah, so absolutely, I'm just saying I think it puts it in a different category when you have that, because the writers were kind of speaking to the credibility of the accounts. Okay,
so
but then we
so let's refocus a little bit. So
I don't think they're making it up. Yeah, I think so. The miracles, I find, the accounts of the miracles, I think, have other indications that they're credible, which I can't apply to these other ones. I haven't investigated them all, and I'm not someone who says there aren't miracles. I think there could be miracles here and there. I'm not even going to say that God. I don't know if I can say God hasn't done a miracle in India for someone. I can't say he hasn't, but when what I think characterizes the miracles attributed to Jesus of Nazareth are the public nature of them happening in Jerusalem and in the surrounding areas where our people have a record. That's what I'm sensing. I'm sensing there's a lot of credulity to it, because it was in front of, okay, I'll be specific. Someone who is a known beggar or a paraplegic in front of them.
let me just break in for a second. Why don't you lead us through one? Maybe let's go through a little bit of chapter and verse. Take the miracle that you think exemplifies this idea the most, and let's look at it. Let's pick it apart, and then perhaps you can explain from your point of view why you think this is proof that this actually happened.
Okay. So we have, first of all, we could look at. I don't want to wrap it all up in one. I can't say that there's a single one that makes the
no,
everything
understood.
I would say about it, but just multiple ones.
The thought process.
Absolutely.
Just to lead you through the thought process. Of course, I understand you.
100%. There could be more. Yeah. So first of all, in John chapter 6.
Okay. All right.
If you want to put the quote on the scene, but
I think it just covers up the entire.
Oh no, John.
Doesn't make the font a little bit. I'll try to though. But you can just read it out loud. I think that's fine. People can follow along at home if they want. So we're in John chapter 6.
1 second. Actually, no. Sorry. I think it's chapter 5. I'm sorry. 1 second.
No problem.
1 second. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. John chapter 5. In the beginning of the chapter. Should I read it out loud?
Sure. Absolutely.
After this, there was a feast of the Jews, which means the Judeans. I mean, once again, John has a distinct vocabulary. It's like I think anyone who understand
all of the texts from that time period essentially mean when it says Jews, even going back already to the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, it really means the people who lived in the kingdom of Judea. Basically,
exactly. But specifically in John, it seems to have in the plural, right? Specifically in the book, in the Gospel according to John, in the plural. Just check it out. It really seems to refer to the religious establishment who were centered in Judea in the temple. That's okay. Okay. So there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in the present tense at Jerusalem, which is already just interesting because it's in the present tense, and it sounds like it's written from a time when someone who knows it is saying it's still there. There is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. By the way,
I've actually just to interrupt for 1 second.
Yeah,
I've actually visited Bethesda. It's in the old city of Jerusalem. It's in the Muslim quarter.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. I'm not a Christian in any way, shape, or form, but I'm fascinated by Christian history. So I have, when I'm in Jerusalem, I will sometimes go visit Christian sites. So if anyone wants to visit that, they can, and I believe it's free.
From what I understand, right. So from what I understand, that until it was excavated, people doubted or wondered if there is such a thing or if this is an invention. And then I think in 49, and then later in the 80s, I'm not sure exactly when. It's been pretty corroborated because finding these 5 porticos, it says, which is called Bethesda, having 5 porches, 5 porticos. Okay, and so they found this actual site, which wasn't. So this was.
Maybe what I'll do is let me put the text on the screen. Give me 1 second here.
John 5. Yeah.
Yep. Got it. And I'm going to do this in. Okay, let's do it right here. Font tab. John 5 and. Okay, it should be visible now. Okay, go ahead.
So in these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered. I'm using the King James, so it might not be exactly.
Sure, no problem.
Withered, waiting for the moving of the water. Apparently, this is what they believed. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whoever so then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made whole of whatever disease he had. So, so whether this happened or not, this is certainly what they believed, and that's why he was waiting there. There was a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie and knew that he had now a long time.
Let me switch over to the King James version because I'm
sorry. Yeah, sorry. It's always
it's not your fault at all. It's
I could have looked at yours. I just had it on a different window.
It's fine.
Sorry. Yeah.
This way we can keep up. So which verse are you in right now? 38 years. Got it.
Now, verse 6. When Jesus saw him lie and knew that he had now a long time in that case, he said unto him, "Will thou be made whole? Wilt thou be made whole?" I mean, maybe it sounds better. I love King James because it's the the least
Certainly,
affected
it
by.
certainly lends a little class to the Bible, right?
It was a class, and it has a few.
When you're reading about
theological-
when you're reading in the end of the book of Judges, when the concubine was chopped up into 12 pieces and sent to each of the tribes. When you're reading the King James version, it sounds a bit more classy.
Yeah. But it's you have to be precise, right? So will, like, do you wish? Do you will it to be? Is that in your will? Ratzoncha, ratzoncha sheteh shalem. Okay. The impotent man answered her, "Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool when I'm coming." I'm sorry, I'm skipping to get to the juicy part. So Jesus said unto him, "Rise, take up thy bed and walk." And immediately the man was made whole and took up his bed and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore said unto him that was cured, "It is the Sabbath day. It is not lawful for thee to carry thy bed."
And I see from this verse why you're saying the Jews mean the Pharisaic authorities.
Yeah, you can see exactly. Yeah. He answered them, He that made me whole, the same said unto me, Take up thy bed and walk. Then asked they him, What a man is thee that said which said unto thee, Take up thy bed and walk? And he that was healed wist not who it was, for Jesus had conveyed himself away, a multitude being in that place. So just a quick one there, because there's a couple that would bring from John.
Sure.
That basically there's a place here that is historically, attestable, and he's telling him to do something which is against. It's almost like as part of the miracle, right? And it's like a subtle theme in John, which is not explained. And I'm just gonna throw it out there. I'm gonna throw it out there. Yeah. I just want to make the point clear. It's a subtle theme that if we follow through with a couple of the other cases, that is not really fully explained, which is this idea of picking up the mat. And we see it attested to in other Gospels in a different place where he tells someone to pick up their mat. And this one being on the Sabbath causes the problem. And what's interesting, I mean, we could have a whole discussion about why, whether carrying and what type of carrying would be forbidden on the Sabbath. But we do know that
the issue here with the pool of Bethesda is that the healing on the Shabbat, right?
No. So here's the thing. It becomes, if we read, that's why we have to read a couple of the accounts and sort of see what's being accentuated each time. In the response as it's written here, the issue is like first and foremost, because maybe they didn't know that he was healed. Maybe they're like, "Why are you carrying your mat, dude?" And he's like, "Well, someone healed me. I was a paraplegic, And they're like, "Well, who told you to pick up your mat? That's against the Sabbath, right?"
Right, understood.
That's what we see here. Now, if we just jump ahead, because I would say that the point, I need to go through the breadth of it so you can see what I'm impressed by.
Okay. Go ahead.
So then, if we go to John in chapter 9.
But if I could just interject here and say one thing. So your main argument here is that this was not done. This was not done in solitude. That this miracle was being witnessed by a bunch of people.
At this point, I can't prove to you from the text that it was. I can only prove to you that they singled him out. That Jesus told him as part of the miracle to do something that was like going to be a jab to them in some way, or it could have been innocent. I don't know. That's what's so impressive in my mind about it, is that the writer doesn't tell you why that's significant, other than it tells you the result of it, but it doesn't tell you why Jesus told you to pick up his mat. If you read in the so-called synoptic gospels, where a similar pick up your mat is told to a different paraplegic,
but John, to center us back here. So what is your? Maybe I'm missing the main point. What is your? So we originally went into this because we wanted to use this as a paradigm of why you believe that the miracles in the New Testament are true. So what is the essence here in the text that we've read right now? Again, I'm not saying that you believe it's the only one, but what's
that's
the
why I
essence
said
here
I
that
told
makes
you
you
that
believe that it's true?
100%. I'm sorry. I told you that I don't have. I'm not a trained apologist where I'm like gonna go. I have like 5 minutes to say. I'm just telling you that if I read, if you and I go right now, go through 3 miracles in John, I think we'll find that in each account there's something historically credible. In this case, we've demonstrated that it's a real place, that he that he does it in a way that incorporates a halachic problem, which is based on their tradition.
So then again, so I'm going to interject a little bit more here. Okay.
Yeah,
So
go for it.
Okay, but how does that prove?
I think also there were other. Yeah.
Well, hold on.
How does it prove that he did the miracle? Right.
How does this prove? How does this prove the historicity of the event? So we have a person again who clearly is anti-rabbinical. Neither of us debate that fact. We have a place, an archaeological place that's been found. So why is this not just the story of someone an anti-rabbinical Jew who goes to a certain place which existed?
Okay, well, I got to get there. I'm sorry.
And
I'm really sorry. 100%. So I was just saying, if we read the breadth and I'm seeing now that I could have said it from the beginning, but it's just that my brain works. The way my brain works is like I read linearly then I put the whole thing together. So if you continue to read down to verse, I think 15.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Therefore, the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. Okay. These things now refers retroactively not to just telling the guy to pick up the mat, but to actually having healed him. Now, the reason why I'm saying, so I'm going to lump this together with John 9, if we could just jump to, because then I'll just be a better. John 9, it becomes more explicit. That's all.
No problem.
So go to John 9. I'll try to read it from your screen now because now I realize that you're putting.
No, we're both on the King James, so we're okay. Whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Just give me a verse. Yeah.
Number. So from the beginning, Jesus passed by. He saw a man who was blind from his birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, "Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Which, once again, there's attestation to this concept of being sickness being an indication of some kind of divine judgment. We have multiple attestation to that Second Temple idea. Jesus answered, "Neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must with the works of him that sent me," etc., etc. Let's skip a little bit where he tells the person, he spits down on the ground, verse 6, when he made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the man with the clay, and said unto him, "Go wash in the pool of Shiloah." It's a different pool, okay?
Sure, that's also been excavated. And to interject for a second, if you're ever in Jerusalem and you go visit the excavations in the city of David, you could see the pool of Siloam. And highly recommend it. They've really done a lot of work down there on the city of David. They made it very, very welcoming to tourists, specifically those who are interested in biblical archaeology. So, anyway, go ahead.
100%. So then he went his way, therefore, and washed and came seeing. So he had his sight restored. The neighbors, now we're bringing in other people. Therefore, and they which before had seen him that he was blind said, "Is this not he that sat and begged?" Some said, "This is he." Others said, "He is like him." But he said, "No, I am he. I am he." So they recognized him, but they see him walking around and seeing that he's can see right now.
Why is this not?
Well, can we just get a little bit more? Because I feel like I think it'll be like a few things together. I think you'll see.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I would just say quickly, there are other people involved. It's not claiming to be a private miracle.
I'll just say one thing, so we can have a bit more of a give and take here. So again, this just seems to me Rebbe stories, right? I mean, we can hear the same kind of stories about many different Hasidic Rebbes. And
good. So for me, the amount of people that's why I likened it a little bit to I can't prove to someone who believes in a conspiracy theory that everybody's lying. That everybody's not lying, but I can just say that when I'm impressed when I see many sort of multiple people surrounding this event, all operating based only on it would only make sense if they did these things if it had happened. So let's just keep reading, and then you'll see what I mean.
Sure.
So they asked him, verse 12. They said, "Where is he?" He said, "I know not." Okay. Basically everyone was like, how did you get your sight back? Who's the guy who did it? These are neighbors and stuff. Right. They brought to the Pharisees, verse 13, him that aforetime was blind. So the Pharisees are investigating this purported miracle. And it was the Sabbath day when Jesus had made the clay. We sort of find out now afterwards, and opened his eyes. Then so now we know the Pharisees are upset that he did miracles on the Sabbath day, but also probably that he made the clay. But you know,
Mhm.
we could get in there. The nitty gritty. There might be a
You
halachic
never know
issue there.
you never know what the Pharisees are going to get upset with on Shabbat. You know.
But what I find interesting is that picking up the bed,
Uh-huh.
and making clay are two literal categories that you could
Sure.
consider a malacha, in addition to the
There's
miracle.
but again, so just to give a little pushback here, there's no doubt that, you know, or I won't say there's no doubt, but it's completely conceivable again that we have this man, Jesus. He goes and does these things. He makes a bit of clay, and he heals on the Shabbat, or he seems to heal on the Shabbat, and that the Pharisees get upset. But the Pharisees are not necessarily saying there's no. I don't think there's any indication here in the text that the Pharisees are confirming that he actually did the healing. Just that he.
Well, let's keep going. This one gets pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
Look how much the way the narrative is described, the way the narrative is described, is, in my mind, hard to make sense of or hard to disbelieve if there wasn't something to it. Look how much effort now they're going to expend in trying to disprove the miracle. Okay, which I want to. Let's see it together. They call this is verse 12. They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. And we know that verse 14 is they're pissed off because it was the Sabbath day that this thing happened. Now, then again, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He said unto them, he put clay upon my eyes, and I washed, and I do see. Therefore said some of the Pharisees, this man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, how can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them. So some of them, the division I understand to be the some of them are, and I think I think both of those are the division. I think both these two rebuttals, or these two retorts, are basically, there's no way he did a miracle and healed this guy. There's no way this person had his sight really restored, because because he's breaking Shabbat. So God wouldn't give a Shabbat breaker the power to heal. So watch this. The rest of the narrative is going to try to be them proving that he didn't get his sight back, because they're like, the guy clearly sees now. There's no way that you really were blind.
Okay, so but again, if I see where it's going, and I don't want to get
fair enough.
tangled up in the text, but so let me give a little bit of pushback. When I see this text, when I read this text, then what I see is, again, kind of a Rebbe story. And then when I'm writing it up, so John, I think John is considered the earliest of the Gospels.
So people like to say the latest written down.
Latest written down, but the earliest in terms of its.
I think it's more. I think it's most closest to an eyewitness than the other ones. That's my personal impression.
At any rate, neither here nor there. So what I see, is, when I read this text, is again a kind of Rebbe story, and then if I want to make the Rebbe story, if I want to make the fan fiction seem more believable, then I'm going to add this element that the Pharisees were shocked that, what a great prophet he is. Okay, it almost and I think this is a trend that I see in the New Testament a lot, and I'll give you a classic example. Right, so the New Testament often wants to portray itself as a fulfillment of prophecy that is laid down in the Old Testament. Maybe the most classic example of that is that Jesus was supposedly, according to the New Testament, he was born in Bethlehem, right? To fulfill the idea that the future Messiah will come out of Bethlehem, will be, because that's where David came from, right? So
this is a mark. This is a map.
Wait. Let me. I got to get a couple words in here and there. So what I want to say is, when I read that, when I read that in the New Testament, what I see is an attempt to kind of artificially move him down to Bethlehem for his birth, in order to, again, artificially, or in order to make it seem as if he's fulfilling the prophecy that the Messiah, that the descendant of David will come out of Bethlehem, which is of course meant figuratively, not literally, right? We're just talking about the house of Jesse was from Bethlehem. So and this is what I see as a trend throughout the New Testament, that you have, rather than being fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy, it's an attempt to kind of wedge its way in, or kind of, to fit to forcibly fit the round peg into the square hole, the square peg into the round hole, and try to manipulate the story so that it seems to be a fulfillment of prophecy. And a lot of times the New Testament will say, Jesus did such and such, as was predicted by such and such prophet in the Old Testament. And that's kind of what I see here. I see this again, and you would find this in any kind of fan fiction where you see not only a story being told, right? A miracle, so-called miracle being told, in my eyes, again, a Rebbe story, and then you're going to give it a little bit of kind of like, juicy background in order to make it look as if it's realistic. So now if you could bring into the idea that the Pharisees are appalled that such a man could actually heal, it's subjective to a certain degree, but from my subjectivity, when I read that it doesn't strike me as truth. It strikes me as an attempt to give scaffolding to the original claim that Jesus actually carried out this healing. If you see what I mean.
No, 100. I think I got your point. So you're saying that people after the fact, people tried to ground. Why do you think people thought he healed? Like Rebbe fan fiction, they made up, so to speak, after, or like even during his life, you would maybe even grant there were some rumors going around that this guy had some supernatural power, right?
Right.
And then you're saying that continued.
Maybe he. I mean, you could look at evangelical preachers to this day, and they do so-called healings. And we could say, oh, it's just all, parlor tricks, that it's all planned in advance. And the person that walks up on crutches and then has a miraculous healing just walks away. But, there is the power of the mind, right? And maybe some of those people are healed, actually, perhaps temporarily, but it's not coming because the evangelical preacher has actually done some kind of miraculous healing on them. It's done either because it's
right.
show so that they can get money, or because the person was so inspired that his own human, internal, ability to change came out somehow. He was inspired and he was able to walk away without crutches. I can see that maybe was the case. That Jesus was the first, evangelical preacher, but that doesn't mean, at least in my eyes, and again, there's a certain amount of subjectivity to it, but I don't see here any proof that the healing.
Okay, so. Had we gone through the complete narrative, I think the multiple
which we don't have time to, because
the multiple points would accrue, which I would say that if you keep reading it through, there are not just, it's not that this is my statement, here's my thesis, and then you could either investigate it or not.
Sure.
That if you were trying to make up a story to historically ground this faith that you had, that he did miracles, then I think the way this one was made up was very convoluted because it has too many turns left and right. That's my argument. That's my thesis. So one example we hadn't gotten through yet.
I would actually disagree with that, because I think
we haven't gotten there yet.
If you look, just to respond, if you look at, I don't know, I'm not a big Star Trek fan, but if you look at some of the stories in Star Trek, they're very elaborate. There's twists and turns. There's references back to earlier, chapters, references to later chapters. It's very complicated. This is why people
Trekkies.
Trekkies, or I'm thinking of, I can't even think of it, Lord of the Rings. These are very complex worlds that people get themselves into, and they can immerse themselves in these worlds and create almost these kind of parallel worlds to the real world, which are very complex and have stories at least as complex as this, that they may seem almost as real as this in some places. Right? So it's not inconceivable. It's not inconceivable
not inconceivable. I guess for me is not the criteria here. It's more of like, does it seem credible? That's my only start. That's my starting point.
So, me, I'm just going to interject a little bit. So to me, it's a matter of subjectivity. But to me, it doesn't seem credible, because it seems the New Testament certainly has an agenda. And it seems that all of these, all of this, again, I could call it scaffolding, or all of these extra added nuances, such as the Pharisees couldn't believe that, were amazed by the miracle, even though if they rejected, or they objected to the idea of him disobeying the Pharisaic halakha on the Shabbat, that they're enthralled by his miracles. This just seems like clever scaffolding to try to give the base story a bit more credence, and it doesn't seem to me that something.
It's in my mind, it's a little bit more than that. But if you keep reading, you'll see they bring in the parents, Because they're like, we don't believe you, basically. So they bring in the
Okay.
parents, and they try to force a confession out of the parents. He wasn't really blind. And
Right.
you see that the parents were actually scared of the Pharisees, because the Pharisees started to put people in Hakham. You can read that ahead for
Okay.
associating with. So
I
then,
got
so
it.
then
I
you
don't
have this other
we have to
layer
go-
in there,
But I
and they're like,
kinda get
we're
the
going to tell
idea,
you.
John.
Yeah.
I kind of get the idea, and I don't think it's
Okay.
going to serve the listeners and the viewers to go through all of the details. I think we see
Fair
where
enough.
you're going with this. Your basic bottom line is you think that these are stories that are too intricate and there are too many details to have been just made up. Okay, so let me ask you. So let's.
Well, it's not
let me
just number of details, but it's the type of details. That's what I would
Right, I
qualify.
understand.
Just to be fair, because it's not about how many details; it's about the details there. I find themselves to be historically plausible. As I said, like if you read the dynamics of like why are they inserting the parents who are brought in to make his testimony, but then they refuse to make a full testimony. They're like, we don't know, we weren't there, but we know that he was blind. You know.
So let me ask you this: Do you have any? But I think we get the idea of where you're coming from, and I don't think it's
100%.
productive to go through every single example. I think everyone who's listening gets the idea. So let me ask you this: are there any other proofs specifically? Are there any external eyewitness accounts outside of the New Testament itself that would give support to this? Maybe somewhere in the Talmud, it's mentioned by the rabbis. Maybe in the Mishnah, I can't think of anything offhand, but
it's
some
tricky area.
historian,
Yeah.
maybe by
It's tricky.
Josephus.
It's tricky. I could point people to that. First of all,
Well, give us
regarding
one
that.
example. Can you give us one example?
No, 100%. I'm saying that it's a difficult area. It's difficult because the New Testament itself, regardless of whether you believe it's inerrant and theologically relevant, it has historical value. So in terms of like a secular treatment of this question, it does itself, for many historians, constitute a certain level of source. But outside it, if you're looking for external corroboration, you have the whole Josephus question. So Josephus is a can of worms because without a doubt, there seems to be some type of later interpolation. Okay, because there's a part of Josephus that we could pull it up if you want, where
Sure. Let's
purportedly he even calls him, says something like, if it was fit to call him a man, he was the Messiah of God. Most historians agree that is a later interpolation. But on the other hand, from what I can tell, most historians also think that it's based on a core element that is there. And if that core element, if they had to sort of reconstruct it, it would include he was a person who went around healing people. So if you want to bring that up, you could just probably Google Josephus. Maybe just do it on Wikipedia. I mean, I know we know it's full of lies also, but I'm just saying as a way of gauging like what I'm saying, because I don't expect anybody. I'm not saying that I know what the original Josephus citation was, but I'm saying that there seems to be something there that is historically credible. So Josephus on Jesus, I think would be, how would we look it up on Wiki?
I'll look it up for a second.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be famous. Josephus on Jesus is a Wikipedia.
I use ChatGPT these days. It actually gives, when it's not hallucinating, it gives. So it speaks about.
I was going to try to say, if we could find it here. Argument for partial authenticity. No, I just want to see here if someone has a version here.
So it speaks about in Antiquities of the Jews.
Well, no, I'm not sure. Actually,
Book 18, chapter 3.
And
I think this is the
he was
verse
known to be virtuous.
You're talking about Antiquities of the Jews, book 18, chapter 3, paragraph 3, and it says that about this time there lived Jesus, a wise man. He was the Christ. He appeared to them alive again on the third day. And then there's a notation here that most scholars agree that this passage has been partially altered by later Christian scribes. Okay. However, many think Josephus originally wrote a more neutral core, mentioning Jesus as a wise teacher, his crucifixion under Pontius Pilate, the continued existence of his followers, none of which I debate, right? None of which I have any problem with. But it's also possible that even if this was not,
you're right. It doesn't say that he healed. I'm sorry. You're right. I remembered it's a better source of if you will, the historicity of the person, the historicity of the crucifixion, the historicity of his disciples believing that he had risen. It's a good attestation to that, but not that he was a healer. So that's fair enough.
But is this not, again, so I'll quote here, again, this is translation to the English, but so about this time there lived Jesus, a wise man. He was the Christ. He appeared to them alive on the third day. So again, let's even say this is not, an alteration,
a later interpretation,
alteration by Christian scribes. I don't think that this verse, let me just quote it. Let me just put it up on the screen so we see what we're talking about. Okay, so this is going to work.
Oh, that's nice you did that. I love the way you share it. It looks great on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that looks awesome.
So even if we're to assume that this is not altered by later Christian scribes, I don't think that Josephus is saying here, this is not any admission on Josephus' part that he believed. No, I wasn't even going to say that. No. That he believed he was the Messiah, right? Christ is
absolutely 100%.
And that he would be actually appeared to them alive again on the third day. What he's saying is this is what his followers believed.
Absolutely, 100%. Right? And I want to take back. It's not a source for, because the original question was if we have any external attestation to the ideas that he healed. So this would be not one of them. The only other I said it's difficult because I don't think there are many. And the only other thing I would point to, if you wanted to, I think you could probably reconstruct from later rabbinical polemics against, anti sort of Jesus of Nazareth, Midrashim.
The Pharisees were not a fan.
They were not a fan of him, but they do. There might be a kernel in that they seem to say that he healed, but through some kind of ungodly power.
Okay,
There's a midrash about that. I wouldn't use that as a proof. I'm just saying. If you're asking why did they admit that he did?
All right, I want to keep this moving along a little bit because the point of this is not to give a 10-hour lecture. It's to give the listeners a kind of taste of where you're coming from, right? And some possible objections. So if you want to bring one source from the Pharisees, and let's move on to some slightly different but related things from either the Talmud or the Mishnah that might prove what you're trying to say if you know it offhand. If not, we could look it up. John? Oops. Oh, you're back.
100%. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Do you want to bring maybe a source from the rabbinic writings?
No, because it's not. For me, it's vague enough where you could say. I just think it's interesting. Instead of denying that he was associated with healing, they attribute it to unsavory forces, which once again does echo what we read about in some of the other gospel accounts. We were just focusing on John, and I don't want to push, it sounded like you might want to move on in the discussion, but I look at the breadth of all of them, and there are other ones, there are other accounts of healing where the pushback is not that it didn't happen, but that it must have happened through some kind of unsavory means. And once again, I think cumulatively, I'm impressed with that sort of way of telling the story. If I wanted to make up Rebbe fan fiction, I would think it would do it in a more glorious way, where everyone was saw it and was amazed.
It's almost to come to your defense. Actually, not that I agree with you, but I'll come to your defense. It's almost like one of the proofs that even skeptical secular scholars will use for the historicity of many of the stories in the Tanakh is that the Tanakh is kind of unique in that it very brutally admits the failures of Israel, right?
Exactly.
In battle.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can call it a criteria of embarrassment. That's like a fancy scholarly word for that.
Right.
And people apply that to the New Testament. I don't know how much you want to go into it, but just a quick shout out to that idea that in some of the other accounts, for example, it'll say that he wasn't able to heal more than a few people in that place because of their lack of faith. Because basically, his healing was partially dependent on people's willingness to believe. Because it's not a magic show. There's probably, if feelings are real, God, you have to ask the larger question: why does God heal supernaturally anytime, opposed to all the time? And it makes sense that because there's some purpose behind it. If he did it all the time, it wouldn't be supernatural. It wouldn't be reflective of anything. So,
okay.
he doesn't do it when people don't have sort of a base. It's not some kind of revelation of faith for them also. So it says in a couple of places that they were derising him, and they were like, they were saying,
we got it.
Yeah, and then it says there that he wasn't able to heal more than a few sick people, and it's like another kind of thing of like,
I think we got it. I think we got the idea. Again, we don't have to do a deep dive into all the text. I think we got the idea. Okay. I wanted to let's move it in a, I won't say different direction, but a slightly parallel direction, right? So the New Testament speaks about many things regarding Jesus's life, his existence. I'm assuming, and maybe we can go through one by one. I'm assuming that if it's mentioned in the New Testament, you take it as historically true. So, for instance, the virgin birth. Just again, I don't want to go into a long.
No, don't assume that. I don't assume that.
Okay, so I'm asking you.
I don't believe,
but what I don't want to do is I don't want to go into a long discussion about each one of these issues. Just the
one-liner.
Kind of,
I'm open to a text as long as a single gospel having layers to it, especially Matthew, who's the most embellished in terms of like midrash, if you will, midrashic overlay, and Luke, who himself says he researched these things. It's very possible that the first couple chapters were based on research that he did that were not verifiable by the same criteria as later ones. So they're not all the same quality in my mind. So I wouldn't put my belief in the historicity of the virgin birth on the same level as the other stuff, because there are less people to corroborate it. That's simple as that.
So do you doubt it? Do you doubt it completely? In other words, do you reject it?
For me, I don't reject it. I don't reject it. I do find it interesting that I think it plays zero role in the message of the actual gospel that Jesus and his later disciples teach. It's almost like an afterthought. So if at best it's a sign from God that like a lot of important people in the Tanakh, whose births had prophecies around them. There was some kind of like an akarat, like a barren woman gave birth. I put it in that category. I don't put it in. I don't think it means that he's any different than anybody else, if you will. So.
So in other words, it could have happened, but.
Yeah, I lean towards it probably happening based on, I don't like to think Luke completely like fumbled it, but on the other hand, it's possible. I don't put much weight in it in terms of the other points.
So again, then just to play devil's advocate here, and I did not bring this up to play devil's advocate. As I mentioned from the beginning, this is not meant to be an antagonistic kind of discussion. It's meant to be, But so if you are to concede that the virgin birth perhaps didn't happen, then it falls into the category of fan fiction, right? And so then it's kind of
that's what I refer to as layers. I prefer that. I refer to that as layers because I try to be historically sensitive to a document. The person who writes that account, Luke, he says from the beginning, this is the result of what I've researched and spoken with the original people that have seen these events. Okay, so that means when he's talking about events that took place in Jerusalem with hundreds of people around that are corroborated by other gospels or similar type episodes that you see in other gospels, that for me is like a more impressive type of of reportage.
But it then does imply that by the time that Matthew and Luke have written down their gospels, and when are you dating Matthew and Luke to? 2nd century.
No, I don't see any reason to put it that late at all.
Okay, 1st century CE.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So whenever Matthew and Luke have written down their gospels, then you're already in a certain sense allowing for the fact that a certain amount of fan fiction has developed around Jesus of Nazareth by this
Once
time.
Again, it's a gray area for me because you asked specifically about the virgin birth narratives. Because I think that from a literary perspective, when you look at it, there's a slightly different quality to them. And one of the differentiating qualities to it is the if you will, I'll call it the private nature of it. Okay, that's all. It doesn't seem to have any other things going on. And at a certain point, it does.
But nonetheless, whether it happened and it's fan fiction, right?
Well, no. If it's fan fiction, then that would be what you're saying. Then some type of later, mythological kind of fan fiction. Jesus
So
was
is-
such a great prophet. He must have had a special birth, just like Moses, right? You could imagine
But then
someone
is-
like theorizing,
Sure.
right? And then they came up with the myth, and then, but I
But
told
isn't
you
that-
I'm actually not ready to. I'm kind of like neither here nor there because
Mhm.
I trust Luke overall. You see, he also writes the book of Acts. I think
Mhm.
his general reportage is very well researched, and I kind of doubt that he would put it in there if it was just a rumor going around. It made it.
All right.
My sense is that he actually interviewed people involved, which would have been Mary. So did something get fudged along the way? I can't say for sure. I'm just telling you, I don't. It's a little bit less theologically significant to me, the way I understand it. Although I get your larger point. But I guess I would say overall, I don't think a book needs to be inerrant to have historical value and credibility. So.
So what about, and I'm assuming I already know the answer to this, but let's say that's something, a doctrine that's outside of the New Testament itself, such as the Immaculate Conception, right? It's nowhere mentioned in the New Testament.
Oh,
Developed
wow.
later in Christian theology. It was codified finally not until the 1800s by the Catholic Church.
I mean,
but it
I don't
was
even know
floating
why they're
around.
doing that. Anything post New Testament like just starts going downhill really fast. I mean,
Okay,
that's
fair enough.
the theme
Do
of
you
what I'm
reject
studying right now.
any of these? Okay.
I mean, everything's
So-
case by case, but it's just so
And maybe
yeah,
for the edification of the viewers, because many people don't know the difference and they get the two mixed up. I guess maybe especially because of Madonna, the singer. Can you give us a brief, just again, al regel echad, what the difference is between the virgin birth and the Immaculate Conception? Because
it's really not.
most people-
I think just from popular knowledge that Immaculate Conception would be some kind of idea that, if I'm not mistaken, someone correct me. It's not my field because I'm not Catholic or whatever.
Sure.
But I think they think
Right.
that she was a virgin not only when she conceived, but then she still remained a virgin somehow, like until forever.
I think it's the idea. Okay.
Am I wrong? I mean,
yeah, but that's all right. Nobody
okay,
knows.
so
what
you
it
said you're a
is.
better Catholic than me, dude. I mean,
Well, yeah, I'm a great Catholic. I can assure you. The Pope would kick me right out
I
of my
just know
butt
they're
if I
trying to
could.
they really
Right.
sink into that narrative.
It's the idea that Mary had never sinned, that she was born.
Oh, that
I'm sorry, that she was born without original sin, where everyone else is born with original sin. She was born
See?
without original sin, and so when that Jesus was conceived in her belly, that he was conceived in a kind of a perfect sinless environment, right?
Yeah, they really care about. I understand how they got to that, but it's like, as I said, it's for me the whole it raises up a whole question, which perhaps is more interesting to go to, which is that what do we even mean by sinning? And because
let's not go there. Maybe we
Okay.
can pick that up in another episode
Yeah.
of the podcast, but let's not
Yeah.
go there. Let me ask you about another one then, which I'm assuming but I won't make any assumptions. But I'm assuming answer to this. Correct me if I'm wrong. Regarding Jesus's, of course, crucifixion, that seems to be quite historical, right? I don't think anyone's doubting that. But his rise from the grave 3 days later. What's your take on that?
so it's
And
cumulative
then what
in that
happened subsequently?
it's cumulative in that since I already believe he was doing miracles when he was walking
Mhm.
around.
Mhm.
So I would just say God was in the house doing stuff like you read about in the Tanakh.
Okay, so you
Okay.
believe that you take that to be historically true, that he rose from
And
the
then
grave
when we
on
get
third
to
day?
the resurrection, when we get to the resurrection sightings, I think historically there's a great credibility to what we just read there in Josephus, perhaps even, but aside from other scholarly sort of analysis of that, at the very least they believed, the disciples from the beginning believed that they saw him. And I would add to that, from the way they're described, they believe they saw him in a physical sense, not in a hallucinatory sense. And there's an important distinction there,
Right.
because it's when we try to explain what they saw or why they believe they saw something, it's very easy to say, well, I think they believe something, but they didn't really see something, right? We'll do that word really. So my argument would
Sure.
be that I think they really did see
that it
something.
actually happened. Mhm.
Yeah, something really
Okay.
happened.
Again,
that-
if we had more time, if this were a deep dive
Yeah,
into
but
the
I do
New
believe
Testament,
that. So
you'll-
based on that,
sources,
so based on that, I
Understood.
believe that it really happened then. It's like,
And what do you think, in a nutshell, what do you think was his fate after his supposed, or his, according to the New Testament, resurrection?
right.
Do you
So I think
agree?
he went around and in this very strange and mysterious state of being, if you will, interdimensionally present and being able to not be seen also. Like they're in a physical room eating and he can appear in there and then he can also disappear.
you know how long I wished I could do that. So
exactly. So I think he was
visibility cloak.
The stories
maybe,
that he appear.
Yeah, technology can maybe help me with that, but
yeah. So I think he was like going around doing that for a while. Oh, sorry for the delay. Yeah, a little bit delay in the speaking.
No problem.
Then he was going around doing that, and then afterwards, what's described as an ascension or going up to heaven until he.
So how do you believe when and how do you believe he went up to heaven?
I think the closest
like Elijah the prophet is mentioned that he goes up in a chariot of fire. That kind of. Is it a repetition of that, or
I think it's either similar to that, and perhaps something that we get a taste of in Moshe being on the mountain for 40 days, where he neither ate nor drank. Which, like, you have to ask, what does that mean on a physical level? Like, if you could have been up there, you weren't allowed to go up there, by the way. But if you were able to go up there and like analyze his body, like, would the cells have been, decaying? Like, how? Because if they were,
then I have to say, I just finished a 9-day fast.
Yeah, 40 though. 40, I'm saying.
I've done 21. That's my longest ever. And
you've done 21, yeah?
Last January, did 21. I don't know.
You didn't eat or drink for 21 days? You didn't eat or drink for 21?
But I didn't eat.
That's what I'm trying to say. He says he didn't drink.
I drank.
Right. They said he didn't eat or drink. It's a big deal. I think the way it's described, if you take it at face value, raises the question of what exactly was going on there, what, and I think that's a taste of, or a preview of what resurrection might be like, where you're actually physically embodied, but the body isn't subject to the normal rules of decay. So,
let's move on again, because I want to wrap this up in the next 10 or 15 minutes, because this is otherwise it just gets. It's just too much for the viewers, right? The platform here is a podcast. It's not a day-long seminar on Christianity.
No problem, bro. No, whatever you want, brother.
There's a certain attention span that even in this exceeded a long time ago. So, but next Trinity. What's your
the last part?
View on the Trinity? The Trinity.
I'm sorry. Trinity. Oh, God forbid.
The Trinity.
Unfortunately, it's the self. This, as a scholar put it, it's the self-inflicted wound of Christianity, the historical religion called Christianity, which purports to base itself on the New Testament and the teachings of Jesus. The person of Jesus, called Christianity, has wounded itself with this doctrine, which developed over the first couple of hundred years. And in my view, it's based on a complete misunderstanding of what Jesus himself said. For example, before Abraham was, I am he, or only God can forgive sins, and then he did a miracle, and they, this kind of accounts, plus what later New Testament writers like Paul wrote about things like him being the image, the image of the invisible God, and being the firstborn of creation, and being the Son of God. These types of statements. People misunderstanding those words that were said by Jewish people in the first century. And we could do a whole other podcast on what those words mean. I think they completely messed up those things, and they ended up in this weird situation where they're like, we know the Father and Jesus are not the same person. They're not the same consciousness. They're not the same. But they also, on the other hand, believe that Jesus is somehow literally the God of the Tanakh. So then they're like stuck, and they're like looking to where they can insert him. They're like, well, maybe at the burning bush, or with those the ones. So then they come up with this theory that God, Hashem, is really is like the name of the species, of like the Godhead, the Godhood, just to be fair. Divinity is called Yahweh, but then the individual persons each have their own name. And you're just like, at a certain point, you're like wanting to rip your clothes, and you're like, you guys just screwed everything up for so long.
So you would be what I guess would be called a Unitarian rather than
absolutely.
So then, but okay. So if you're a Unitarian,
I do defend the usage. I would defend the usage that the New Testament, the terminology that they ascribe to the Messiah as Son of God, I think, is authentically Jewish and biblical,
Right.
Tanachi. So I would defend that, but I would say the way that it gets interpreted later as this pre-existing other divine being, Son of God, I think is totally wrong.
And we spoke about that extensively offline a couple of weeks ago, but I don't think we have time to go into detail right now. Maybe I'll let you, give again on regular chad on one leg version in a second. But the question that I would have for you is: so if you're a Unitarian, then how would you describe the relationship between God the Father and God the Son in your eyes?
No, God the Son. No, it's not a biblical word. There's no God the Son. God forbid.
Okay.
God
so
the
then
Father.
How would you describe the relationship
is...
between Yahweh, who is not even, as Solomon says, not even what you gotta let me finish the sentence. Not even the heavens, let alone that the heavens can contain him. He's outside of space and time. He doesn't have any kind of physical existence. And this individual Jesus, who we both agree, although we have different interpretations of who he was, but we both agree walked the earth as a physical form. So how do you describe the relationship between those two, again, elements?
On regular hat, on one foot,
yeah,
I understand that Jesus, by being the Messiah and being called Son of God, which is a biblical term, the Tanachi term also,
sure,
has a special status and I think intimacy as a prophet with God. So much so that he's his father. I think that he's, in a sense, the idealized Israel and the idealized human, in a sense, like the way that Adam and the way that we're supposed to be. So in a sense, I don't attribute any special relationship or status to him. Sorry, status is not the right word. A special relationship with the Father, with God, that is in something that we're supposed to also partake in. I think that we're supposed to, like Israel as a corporate entity is called Son of God, the forerunner.
Okay, fair enough. Or it mentions sons of God at the beginning of the book of Job. It mentions it with relationship to the Nephilim. It's a common concept, but again, we don't really have time to get into that. Maybe in a different podcast we could focus on that one element, because I know that's important to your point of view. But so you see him as a separate entity. When I say separate, one has to define your terms very carefully. Just as you and I are separate entities from God, right? We're all part of God's God's world, but we're separate entities from God. Just as Moses, the greatest prophet that ever lived, was born, of a human mother and a human father, and was separate from God, right, during his existence here, at least, and afterwards. So that's the way in your understanding of Jesus of Nazareth, that's the way you see him.
Yeah, I would just add to that, though, that we have a view of humanity that's probably very diminutive, like has reduced humanity, obviously on the side of, if we take a Greek philosophical concept of like creator and creation as two like unbridgeable sides of all existence. Yeah, like obviously people are on the created side, but humans are unique in being created in the image of God, also having this like, in a sense, this straddling the heaven and earth, the spiritual and
like the yin and yang. We get it, but
so I think that there's room to say that he has straddled that and has come to experience the connection with the divine in a fuller way as a forerunner, in a sense, the way that we're supposed to, and we're being brought into that. So I do think there's a lot
so you would compare him to Adam, maybe,
or that Adam was supposed to be. Imagine Adam had eaten from the tree of life. Let's just imagine that. I don't know. I think it's like Adam if he had eaten from the tree of life or had not eaten from the Esadat Torah, then maybe this is what he was supposed to be.
I have a friend. I'm sorry, I interrupted you there, but let's just move on. I have a friend who lives in Cyprus who he also has an interesting theology regarding Jesus, and he says that he believes Jesus was an angel and that sat among the heavenly host, and just as angels can come down and assume human forms on earth.
Yeah, it's a Jehovah's Witness kind of idea too.
I suppose, yeah, something like that.
They believe that. He's a Michael, I think. Yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason to think that, and
okay.
That's not the way they describe it. They don't describe it that way either.
So you see him as kind of the perfected human being, the paradigm of what a human being should be and should have been had we not
Yes.
sinned in the Garden of Eden.
Yes, but also the way that God has provided for Israel first, and then through Israel, because he represents Israel and his book, he's like, but also nations of the world to be brought back into that, and then all the political, global consequences of that. I think that's certainly part of the package. I don't think the Messiah is just like a spiritual role, like someone. I think it's all the stuff that we would agree on we mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, like which establishes the kingdom of God on earth.
You see him as created in the same way that you and I are created. We're maybe not perfect, but he's a created entity. He's not the creator.
Absolutely not. I mean, yeah, I tried to make that really clear earlier. Yeah, I'm like very offended and very upset by people who believe in Jesus who believe that, because for me they're like ruining it for everybody. But it's apparently meant to be that way. If what I believe is true, apparently, Yahweh has like willed it to have this mass confusion for 2,000 years. I mean, I know it's very inconvenient for my case. So I'm just telling you that everybody else got it wrong, except
Sure.
But
well, it's actually kind of inconvenient because it's actually kind of inconvenient because it makes the whole thing harder to swallow, right? I mean,
100%.
There are always angles of attack for various religions, and the Trinity, or the idea that Jesus is both 100% human and 100% divine, is certainly an angle of attack against standard Christianity, just as the rabbis, rabbinical Judaism leaves itself open to many angles of attack. So
exactly,
in my opinion, it makes it harder. Your doctrine, although again I don't agree with it, is I would say a bit more easy to swallow. Okay. Yeah,
comparable to the Karaite phenomena, though, in a sense, you could say rabbinical Jews, who are like the majority of Jews and the representatives of Judaism, Torah, for most of the world through most of history, we could both say, well, we think they've inserted a bunch of stuff in there which is just completely not biblical and not true, and they've ruined it. They've also blocked the way to the truth for a lot of people.
They ever? I couldn't.
And then you and I are like, we're coming as a minority, and we're saying, yeah, there was a historical movement, Qara'ism. They always had it right. Like I could also point to some Unitarians throughout the ages, and I could be like, well, the New Testament itself is completely Unitarian, and I could like argue all that. But I am in the minority, and that's what it is.
Got it. So then let's finish up with this question. So then again, I know you probably want to flesh this out for a much longer period of time, but since time is running short here, so then what is your understanding of Jesus of Nazareth regarding his role as Messiah? Let me just break it down a little bit. So was he Messiah in the time he lived? Was he Messiah after he supposedly, again, I don't even have to say, but after he supposedly died and then came back to life, when he ascended to heaven? Has he been Messiah all of these years for the past 2,000 years? Will he be Messiah over Israel in the future? And then of course the age-old question is, if he was Messiah in ancient times, and why was there no world peace? Why did he not usher in the Messianic age in the time that he lived 2,000 years ago? And yeah, I'll let you answer.
It's a great question. We really need to do another episode on this, but as quick as I can, then we could come back to it. I think Messiah meaning anointed. I think essentially anointed by the Spirit of God is what we see, that model of the kings in David and even Saul in this prophetic way. I think that happened. So he was the Mashiach, being anointed and appointed as the Mashiach. Doesn't mean that you get recognized as such, evidenced by David. So I think we should look at David as an example of someone who was anointed and appointed to be the Mashiach. He was literally called the Mashiach, but like king, whatever, and not recognized yet. So if there was this period of time,
the kings were anointed, so they were Mashiachs.
Yeah, but he was like the rightful king, even though he wasn't recognized as such for a while, whilst the sitting king was trying to kill him. So I think this is a picture of how I understand the last 2,000 years. And as for his role now, I think of it as a mediatory role, which probably is this huge can of worms. But I think when I say mediator role, I mean like Moshe and like the prophets. Okay, so I stand by that they were mediators. They said literally, I stood between you and God because you couldn't hear God's voice. Like I stood between you, mediator. Let's all be semantic about it.
Sure.
So and I think that I also believe that part of his role was to have suffered and be rejected, which, once again, I look to the Tanakh as the precedent for that. Like Joseph, and
Sure, all
David,
the greats, all the greats,
especially the great ones, they are rejected first, and that's almost like part of the divine plan. And I think it itself is a testimony and a revelation of God that we have. That if you believe that happened and that he was, that you try to live your life according to, like, so it's like how someone who's speaking words of God and has the Spirit of God, had to suffer apparently and be rejected by the establishment. And it doesn't just make you a Karaite, because the point is to then not just take it in an emotional direction of like, therefore I hate the Jews or something, God forbid. But I'm saying there's a whole other, what did he teach? What's the purpose? The resurrection itself is a comfort in that. And I think I would just end my whole little speech there by saying that I think his purpose is to testify to the reality of resurrection that we read about in Daniel, that it's an actual real thing that is like already got jump started. And it's that itself is like real. People, rabbinical Jews who believe it, I'm so happy that they believe it because they say it, in the prayer every day, 3 times.
Right.
It's mind blowing if you really believe it, and it's not reincarnation. It's not some kind of weird.
Spiritual... Well, it's actually a polemic against the Sadducees.
I know. But it's not just. It's a polemic because they really believe that.
Jesus certainly was not a big fan of the Sadducees, but he seemed to tolerate the Sadducees slightly more than he did the Pharisees, who obviously.
But I think, I just think they believed it because they inherited the belief and they saw it either implied by the scripture or necessitated by scripture that God, that's the way that God will bring justice eventually, is to put in an embodied state, give people their just reward one way or the other. And that's my, I think this event, if it's true, is a testimony to that. And it's part of its purpose. Yeah.
Okay. So moving right along. So where is he right now in the year 2026, and what is his interaction with humanity?
I have no idea. Meaning, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I believe I said I likened it to like Moshe, like the way Moshe was present physically with God on the mountain, but perhaps in some kind of suspended state. Also, the way
Moses is
Eliyahu. The way Eliyahu was taken up, but in a prolonged version of one of those states. And I don't know what to make of people who have personal interactions with him. I read about those in the book of Acts, and I tend to believe that they're real. I don't know what to do about the other ones, and it's not my job really to I can be critical about them. I think weird, when people have all sorts of, they saw Jesus on the beach with sunglasses. I don't know. I probably don't believe that.
I've seen that a couple of times. Get back being serious. Do you pray to Jesus?
I don't. That's not the word I would use. I think once in a while I will, because I think that he exists. I think he exists and is alive, unlike the people, the prophets of old who were sleeping. Samuel was forced awakened against the law of God. So I think that's true. I think he was forced away. His spirit was somehow like.
Sure, I actually agree that actually happened.
Yeah, I don't try to I
believe in life after death because I believe in resurrection, and sure, I take that as an actual true story.
Yeah, so I think he was forced awakened, but it's implicit, and what we see there is that he's supposed to be resting. You're not supposed to wake the guy up. So I think Jesus is actually up. He's not resting. So that means that you theoretically could poneh elav, you could address him, but but I wouldn't address him any other way that I would the same way I would address a prophet who's here. If Elijah the prophet, Elisha was here, or Eliyahu, I would go to them and I might say, please pray for my son who died. I might say that. But on the other hand, I have a beautiful, robust relationship with Hashem. I don't need to. It's not like instead of.
So you don't see it as a violation of lo tidrshu al metim. Do not make contact or request
because he's not dead. No. God forbid. I don't like any of that Rebbe stuff. All that Rebbe stuff of the.
No, that's straight from the Torah. That's straight from the Torah. Okay. Right.
Yeah. No, I mean all the ways that people do things to their tzaddikim now. They go to the graves.
Last week I was in Tiberias at the Rambam's grave, and you will see people literally holding onto the Rambam's grave praying, right? So
and if they address him, then they're breaking the law.
I don't know what they're doing because thank God there's not.
I know some do. some do address
course
him.
they do.
Dress, I
Without
don't with the
a doubt.
Rambam, but some dress
Without a
like
doubt.
Rabbi Nachman and stuff like that. So
But
I
if
think
you were
it's
to do
different.
that,
Yeah.
if you were to do that regarding Jesus, you personally don't see that as a violation of lo Jerusalemite. Do not.
Only because I
Yes.
think he's been alive, and it's a different
Got it.
category. It's not really
So
like
same with
Melech.
Eliyahu, you would consider it okay to pray to Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet?
I mean, he was taken up. I don't know what that status. His status is very enigmatic. I can't really say I know if he's like. I don't know what that is. Honestly, I can't say. So
you think, okay. So you think that Jesus is we don't know. We could say that Elijah's status is indeterminate.
yeah.
But
Whereas
you're
Jesus was
saying
like
that-
active. There's testimony that he was active after having died. So in that sense, I can say like I'm more confident that he is alive. Where in a real way, it's not a forbidden to dress someone who's alive. Eliyahu, he's just not someone we have a relationship with because he's like kind of like he's like in suspended animation until God just like I don't know, tells us what the heck happened there.
Well, you see Jesus as wherever he is, being very
He's
alive.
Alive, yeah. I don't, I can't say.
So
like,
where is he? Where is he?
I think
Like,
whatever
no
Shemaim in a heavenly unseen realm.
But accessible, not sleeping. Not in the same way Samuel was speaking when he was woken up by the witch of Endor.
Well,
Or
it
not
could be
the way
similar to that, but that was forbidden. He was speaking as a
Right.
person, and he, as a prophet, he knew the will of God. Like he's like, well, you woke me up. Like you and your sons are gonna be with me tomorrow. It wasn't like
Right.
let me check with God what's gonna happen. Like he knew right away. So as a prophet of God and someone has the words of God in his mouth, like we read in Deuteronomy, I think Jesus can be that mouthpiece of God even now, but I don't think that doesn't make him God, and that's why I would be very careful. I'm honestly bugged out by it, so I'm being honest. This is just like I'm very uncomfortable with the way that line is completely either blurred or eradicated with most Christians. I'm very uncomfortable with it because I have a relationship with God, the Father, as we would say. So I feel like you have to be really careful. You shouldn't say anything to Jesus that you wouldn't say to like Elisha if he was like right in front of you. If Elisha was right in front of you, you bow down to his knees and be like, "Save my child." Like that's a legitimate thing to do. Yeah.
I think we get it. And finally, last question: what's your vision of the future for Jesus? So you believe that he's going to be future Messiah over? Are you okay?
Could you just hold 1 second? My wife's asking.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. We're good. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
What
So
you
what's your vision again of Jesus in the future? So we've spoken about the past, we've spoken about the present, and what about the future? How's it all going to go down?
I think it's going to go down largely the way, if you and I were reading the Tanakh together, we would look forward to the Messianic age, and the Davidic dynasty being renewed. I think I might draw a little bit from what things I've seen through the New Testament have brought me back to the Tanakh and open up, giving me insights that I maybe haven't had before.
Mount of Olives, descend, enter the Temple Mount.
Yeah, but those are specifics. But I'm saying you and I would agree that he's going to stand in Jerusalem, and the Torah is going to go out of Jerusalem, and he's going to lead the people of God. And there's probably going to be wars. I think that part of the job of the Mashiach is to fight the wars of God. I think there will be that, like a reckoning on earth, like in a physical way. And I think that the purpose of his having died and resurrected so much before that will perhaps be building. Like I think it does bring a lot of people potentially to faith, and I think that if it's true, then there's a huge vindication of some of his teachings in the eyes of the Jewish people, which is a big deal. I mean, you and I both agree probably that one of the biggest problems of our Jewish brethren is the almost deification of the rabbinic class.
Absolutely.
And like who's the better to put that message across?
That's why I literally will not walk into a Chabad synagogue.
Yeah.
I can't.
I mean, if he comes back, he's like the first Karaites, in that sense. He's like
Jesus.
Yeah, it's gonna be like the biggest 2,000-year-old slap,
Okay.
like.
So do you think? So what you're implying is he's going to actually come back from the dead. He's going to be resurrected. Okay.
Well, he is resurrected, but he comes. Yeah, I think he is. But yeah.
Okay.
That he comes.
So
he appears.
Appears. Do you think he's going to appear at the same time, or after the resurrection that's spoken about in Daniel chapter 12 verse 2?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's a great the order of eschatology is tricky. I don't claim to have authoritative understanding of that. I've heard a lot of I think it's hard to really know because things don't seem to happen according to the way that we usually sequentially read them. You know, it looks like the Mashiach comes first and then calls the tribes of Israel back and everybody back. Yet it looks like now that
again, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do a deep dive. I just want to get a general idea. And then the final question, I guess, would be: so now in your theology, he's back. He's king over Israel. He's fighting all the wars. What happens after that? Do we all live forever? Does he live forever? Does he assume permanent kingship over the nation of Israel? Does he have a physical son who takes over for him, just as Solomon took over from David?
I don't think resurrection is the same as reanimation. So I think when you're resurrected, it's for eternal life, the way Daniel says, right? Hayeh olam, he says, right? So I don't think there's going to be any sons.
So just an important point there, in case the listeners missed it. You're saying that Jesus has never died in your theology, so he's not resurrected. He's just reanimated.
No, he died once, like everybody, and I think that he's
after he got it. He died. Yeah. He was resurrected in ancient times on the third day, and then he assumed some state of being alive up in heaven, but he didn't die again. Yes. So therefore, he can't be resurrected. We were only resurrected once. He already went through his, right? So he's not going to be.
But that's what resurrection is. Resurrection is. Yeah. Resurrection's for eternal life, like we read in Daniel. It's not. It's not what you read about Elisha or Eliyahu. Elijah or Elijah, that's like reanimating. Like someone died and then they live out the rest of their natural life. That's
understood. As it says in Daniel chapter 12, those will be everyone, all of those who lie in the dust will be brought back to life. Some for eternal reward and some for eternal derision. So you're saying that you're resurrected once. Okay. So when he's reanimated, what happens then? Is he now king for eternity, whatever that means?
Yeah, Israel? I mean, I'm somewhere on the fence between like two stages. This is just from my own reading of Tanakh and also New Testament, and also later I read like Saadia Gaon, someone I'm a big fan of. I read he's a Gaonic period in the 900s. He describes two stages of resurrection. Yeah, I know that, but I would say to his credit,
I'm just saying that as an aside.
I know. Aside from that, he's got some good. He puts things together in a compelling way. Sometimes I'm a little partial to the view that there's sort of like this reestablishing of Earth in the way that you and I you just described. King, people will either be resurrected for a longer life or eternal life. Some people, blah blah blah. And maybe there's kind of like reckoning, but that there might be yet another stage. I don't know. So in rabbinical terminology, you could say it's the difference between Yomot HaMashiach and Olam Haba. The days of the Messiah and and the world to come. They're not necessarily the same.
Do you think there will be another king after?
Well, after him, I don't think so. I read. We have the same scriptural data. That's why we should go into it if we want to. I don't have a set belief. My general impression is that like he is the next in line, and he's now been made immortal. So therefore, you don't need anybody after him. But I don't know. Maybe in God's economy, there's some kind of room for other Nisi'im, as they call them in the Tanakh. Sometimes Nisi'im, like princes. Maybe, I don't know.
Got it. All right, John. I think we're going to wrap it up here. Any final words?
No, I appreciate the dialogue, and I think we tried to cover some ground at the end, but it would be cool if you want to dig into any of those points that you raised at a different time. Sure. Just because I think the book, is open before both of us, the Tanakh meaning, and I think there's a lot to see there that we haven't yet seen, or that we could put together, we could think together. That's what I try to do in my life.
Absolutely.
Not let anybody else decide for us what things are.
100%.
Yeah.
Is the basic Karaite motto, right? Search well in the scriptures,
Beautiful.
Do not rely on my opinion. Right. Sure.
Beautiful.
We all have to become. It's just as it's funny. I'll just end up with one, anecdote or one point of view. Just as Eldad and Medad were prophesying in the camp, and the Israelites came to Moshe and they said, look what's happening. And Moshe said, "Are you jealous for me? I wish all of Israel were prophets, right?" So it's the same way. I think that this basic motto of charism, search well in the scriptures and do not rely on my opinion. That's my wish for all of Israel, right? That everyone becomes an expert in the scripture, and they don't have to rely on individuals. In other words, the more knowledgeable that Israel becomes in Scripture, the better it is for everybody. Just as Moshe saw that the more prophets there were in Israel, the better it is for everyone. So
it's beautiful.
it's similar kind of.
Amen.
All right. So with that thought, I thank you, John, for joining us.
Sure.
And
thanks again.
we can definitely talk offline and see if there are other topics that we may want to cover separately. And we'll just take it from there. So once again, this has been Hakham Melech Rahmiel Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, speaking to early Christianity expert Jon Nelson. And we hope you enjoyed this World Alliance of Qara'im podcast. We'll talk to you soon. Shalom, shalom.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 אוי, שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אוי 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 שיר במים